Okay, this is now tarot lesson number 28, and I've got some visual aids written out here, so I'll just plunge straight into the talk. I think when we do a reading, any kind of reading, we want what we say to be useful, helpful, and valuable to the person asking the question. Ideally, we give them the right answer as well, but it's a bit like if what we say is useful, valuable, and helpful, then probably we've done a good job. And I was remembering, if you've ever hammered a nail into a piece of wood, sometimes you hit the nail and the wood splits. So what you do, if you suspect that kind of thing is going to happen, instead of hammering the nail into the wood, you get a drill, you drill a hole, and then you can hammer the nail and it won't split the wood. And that may be one way of thinking about what we call bad cards, right? So if we get, for instance, the Five of Pentacles in the future, it doesn't have to mean, yes, you're going to become poor and everything's going to work against you. Maybe what we do is we think, okay, if this is the card in the future, this is what you're facing, the potential to be poor or the potential to be out in the cold, walking barefoot through the snow, an uncomfortable, unpleasant situation. So, since this might happen, because it's the future, but it's not written in stone, it might happen. What can you do now? And what can you change, or what can you do differently so that if this happens, it's not as bad? Or if it happens, it's going to be like a light version of the Five of Pentacles. In the same way that instead of hammering the nail into the wood and causing the wood to split, you take precautions or you're alert to what might go wrong and you drill a hole, then you don't have a problem. So in the same way with any kind of negative card, what can or should you do to make the problem easier to handle? And this is where you, the reader, can use your intuition or your past experience or your knowledge by making suggestions about what the questioner can do to make this difficult situation easier. So, with this idea of being useful, helpful, and valuable to the questioner, I wanted to talk a little bit about astrology, because a couple of people have asked about if I could talk about astrology. And astrology is very seductive, because you read a little bit and it seems so right and so correct, and you think, I really ought to know this, I want to incorporate it into the readings that I do. And somebody, I think his name is Dan Swan Tarot, mentioned about reading Crowley and Golden Dawn, and the five of batons is Saturn in Leo, and the six is Jupiter in Leo, and the Saturn in Leo indicates that Saturn will restrict the freedom and independence of Leo. So, this is all very debatable. And this is my problem with astrology, in that you can't just take one or two ideas and expand on them and expect to get the right answer, because it's a bit like with astrology, you need to know 50,000 points before you can make a beginning. This is not the same with the tarot, and I'll get to that in a minute or a few minutes. But this is what the Aries rising chart looks like, where you've got Aries in the first house, Taurus, Gemini in the third, Cancer, Leo, and all the way around. So you get Capricorn, which is supposed to naturally go with the 10th house, which is the house of government or being before the public. And so this is what a lot of people refer to, and this is what they think the Zodiac is. But we can't just do that. So I wrote down here, this is 30 degrees in Aries. So there are decanates, so-called. And this is like one level of understanding that's beyond Leo, the king. Because one of the things that Dan Swan mentioned was, or the information he got from Crowley was, Leo is freedom and loves freedom and independence, I think. And the thing is, are Leos free? And are they independent? And they're not. You get this a lot with astrology. People, I came across this statement by somebody who talked about Geminis are, I can't remember the exact quote, Geminis are idea factories. And the thing is, Geminis aren't idea factories. Geminis will talk and they'll ramble on about stuff, but most of what they say isn't that useful or good. And it's certainly not brand new ideas, and it's not really, they may churn out opinions, but they don't really churn out ideas. So Leo, okay, first 10 degrees of Leo is Leo. The second 10 degrees is Sagittarius decanate, and the third 10 degrees is the Aries decanate. So Leo's the king, Sagittarius the old philosopher, and Aries the child. So if you're born at the beginning of Leo, you're not the same as somebody born at the end of Leo. Because if you're born at the beginning of Leo, you're a king who's a king, or a queen who's a queen. But if you're born in the middle of Leo, you're a king who's also a philosopher. There's a difference. There's a subtlety or an overlay or a different kind of mentality in the middle of Leo. It's different from what there is at the beginning. Because in the beginning, you just want to rule. You want to be a king. But in the middle, it's Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the old philosopher who likes to sit out in the garden and philosophize. They're not that great about getting things done because they like to philosophize. And that's the middle part of Leo. Whereas the end of Leo is the Aries decanate, and Aries is the child of the Zodiac. So you've got the end of Leo is the king who's also a child. So child can mean childish or childlike. So if you've got a Leo who's having a temper tantrum, probably it's the end of the sign. So you can, if you say to the questioner, okay, let's say somebody wants to know, am I going to get married? And you say, yes, it's going to be a Leo. And they say, what's a Leo like? What can you tell them that's helpful, useful, and valuable? You can say, well, Leo's the king, but then what? You can't really, you don't know whether the Leo is going to be predominantly an Aries decanate Leo, so they're childish, or whether they're going to be maybe more stable. And the other thing is, then you get into things like Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. And so if you're in the middle of Leo and you've got Jupiter in Pisces, that's different from somebody who's got Jupiter in Taurus. Because with Jupiter in Taurus looking like that, you've got a practicality. And you're realistic in a way that Jupiter in Pisces isn't. So you've got all these subtleties and wheels within wheels and layer upon layer. And that's why you need to know 50,000 things before you can talk sensibly and usefully about astrology. And one last thing before I get to the tarot. This diagram I showed you is the so-called natural zodiac, where you've got Aries rising and Taurus go to you and Gemini and so on all the way around. But there was a fellow called Carol Payne Toby years ago wrote a book called The Astrology of Inner Space. And Carol talked about there being 3 different zodiacs, or 3 versions of the same zodiac. So you get the Aries rising chart, the one I just showed you. That's the chart of the initiate. And so the correspondence between signs and houses is not for everybody. Whereas the man in the street, which is most of us, Carol Payne Toby talked about it should be the Leo rising chart. So you've got Leo there, you've got Virgo, the sign of the servant on the house of hospitals. prisons. You've got Libra, it's the sign of partnerships, on the house of friends. You've got Scorpio, the sign of the criminal, on the house of government. You've got Sagittarius, the house of the philosopher, on the house of the sign of the philosopher, on the house of philosophy. You've got Capricorn, that rules graveyards, on the house of death. You've got Aquarius, which rules weirdness, on the house of other people. You've got Pisces, the nurse, on the house of sickness. You've got Aries, the sign of the child, on the house of children. You've got Taurus, that rules real estate, on the house that refers to the home. You've got Gemini here, and then you've got Cancer. Cancer worries, on the house of money. Whoever is happy about money? Yes, you are today, but maybe not tomorrow, because you fluctuate. So people talk about Aries, Leo in the 5th house ruling children. It's all very debatable. And yet people who call themselves astrologers will talk blithely about the signs of the zodiac and think they know what they're talking about. But it's a bit like they know 5,000 things about the zodiac or about the signs of the zodiac. But there's another 45,000 that they have to find out first. So I think you cannot easily speak usefully, valuably and helpfully about astrology, but you can. You don't need to know anything really when it comes to the tarot, because you're dealing with pictures. And everybody and anybody can look at a picture and get an idea of what's going on. And then you can relate what's going on in the picture to the question that you asked, or to a situation that's going to be coming up, or a situation that happened in the past, depending if your question is about past, present, or future, and if it's about you or about other people. And all you need to do is look at the picture. So you, the reader, can look at the picture and bring a lot of knowledge to bear on what's going on. But the questioner, who may never have seen a card before in their life, can also look at the picture and get an idea of what's happening. And they can then take that idea and they can make it more real or more realistic for them, because they know who this person is and what their name is and what they do for a living and what their hopes and dreams are. So if you look at the Two of Batons, we've got somebody in a high position holding the world in his hand, looking out into the distance, which is a whole story in itself. And so depending on what the question is, you get an idea of whether this is going to work out well, let's say, or how you're going to do something. Because let's say the question is, how am I going to make tomorrow better than today? How are you going to do it? You're going to climb high. You're going to have high expectations. You're going to look into the distance and imagine what kind of future you want for yourself. And you want to hold the world in your hands. So you have dreams, you have goals, you have ambitions, you have stuff you want to do. Rather than think, well, I'd kind of like it, but if it doesn't happen, that's okay as well. That's kind of weak-willed and lily-livered, as they sometimes say. You know, it's not dynamic and it's not forceful and it's not, I'm going to make it happen kind of attitude. But if you're going to make tomorrow better than today, you're meant to be like this. It doesn't mean you have to be like this forever. Because the question was, how do I make tomorrow better than today? That's how you do it. How, not what. How you go about it. How you do it. Whereas tomorrow, so how am I going to make tomorrow better than today? With the Two of Swords, you've got blindfold. You can't see, but what you need to do is think about it. So, but don't just think about one thing, because you've got two swords crossing each other and they're going in opposite directions. So you look at a situation and then you make yourself look at the other side. Maybe it's two sides of the same coin, but you make yourself look at the other side of the situation, rather than just something happens, instead of assuming that you know everything about it and you know what to do, stop, sit, because this person's standing, right? Difference between them. But here you've got somebody sitting, so you stop, you sit, and you think, okay, this is what I know, this is what I may be ignoring, but I ought to think about, or this is what I've never thought about, so I think about it now, and that's how I'm going to make tomorrow better than today, because a situation is going to be handled differently and better because I thought it through. And then, what do we got? Strength. That is too much to end on a strength. How do you make tomorrow better? You act like the woman in white with pure motives and purity and pure thoughts of beauty and love. You close the lion's mouth. The lion can represent ego, right? So because it goes back to, interestingly enough, it goes back to this piece of paper, if I can find it. This one, remember that? Leo, the king. So we kind of began with Leo and we're going to end with Leo. So what do you do to make tomorrow better? You have the strength of character, the strength of will, the strength of moral uprightness to go with the human part of you and not the animal part. Because the animal part can want revenge and want to, lions grab antelope and rip them apart with your teeth. So you don't act in a harsh, violent, mentally cruel way tomorrow. That's how you make tomorrow better. Don't do that. Get the human part of you, or the beautiful part of you, to make the lion part settle down. That way you have strength. Okay, so that was it for number 28. So, hope you enjoyed that. I have nothing else to say. So today's Saturday, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, back on Tuesday with number 29. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.